The cabin smelled of pine and old books. A single lantern glowed on the wooden table, casting soft shadows across the room. Emily's dark hair fell loosely over her shoulders, and her hazel eyes traced the patterns in the firelight. She was 32, a graphic designer who'd left the city for a quieter life, seeking peace after years of deadlines and noise. But peace, she'd learned, wasn't just about silence. It was about settling the restless parts of your heart. Outside, the storm churned, a low growl of thunder rolling through the valley. Emily sipped her tea, the warmth spreading through her chest. The cabin was her sanctuary, a place she'd bought 2 years ago after her mother passed. It was simply one bedroom, a tiny kitchen, and a living room with a stone fireplace. She'd filled it with small comforts, a quilt her mother had sewn, a shelf of worn novels, and a collection of mismatched mugs. But lately, the cabin felt less like a home and more like a hiding place. The problem was the letter. It sat on the table, folded neatly beside the lantern. Emily hadn't opened it in weeks, but its presence was heavy, like a stone in her pocket. It was from her estranged father, Michael, who lived in a small town a few hours away. She hadn't seen him in 15 years, not since he left when she was a teenager. The letter had arrived a month ago, out of the blue, and she'd read it once before shoving it into a drawer. He wanted to see her. He was sick, he said, and didn't have much time. Emily set her mug down and leaned back in her chair. The fire crackled, a log shifting and sending sparks up the chimney. She didn't owe him anything. He'd walked away, leaving her and her mother to pick up the pieces. But the letter stirred something in her. Guilt, maybe, or curiosity. What did he want after all these years? Forgiveness? Closure? She wasn't sure she had either to give. The storm grew louder, rain hammering the roof. Emily stood and walked to the window, peering into the darkness. The trees swayed, their branches clawing at the sky. She imagined her father out there, alone in his own storm, waiting for a response she wasn't ready to send. The thought made her chest tighten. She turned back to the letter, her fingers brushing its edge. Maybe it was time to face it. The next morning, the storm had passed, leaving the air crisp and heavy with the scent of wet earth. Emily stepped onto the porch, her boots sinking slightly into the damp wood. The forest around her cabin was alive with colora reds and golds of autumn leaves, the green of pine needles glistening with rain. She inhaled deeply, letting the cool air steady her. Today, she decided, she would read the letter again. Back inside, she sat at the table, the lantern now unlit but still glowing faintly in her memory. She unfolded the letter, her hands steady but her heart uneven. Her father's handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged in places. He wrote about his life, his regrets, his illness, a heart condition, he said, that was worsening. He didn't ask for much, just a chance to talk, to see her one last time. "I know I don't deserve it," he wrote, "but I'm asking anyway." Emily's throat tightened. She remembered him vaguely, a tall, with a deep laugh, always smelling of sawdust from his carpentry work. She remembered the day he left, too, the way her mother's voice broke when she told Emily he wasn't coming back. The years that followed were hard, filled with her mother's quiet strength and Emily's own anger. But now, reading his words, she felt that anger waver, replaced by something softer, more uncertain. She spent the day restless, pacing the cabin, tidying shelves that didn't need tidying. The letter stayed on the table, a silent challenge. By afternoon, she couldn't ignore it anymore. She grabbed her coat, stuffed the letter into her pocket, and headed out. She needed to walk, to think, to let the forest clear her mind. The trail behind her cabin wound through the woods, a narrow path lined with moss and fallen leaves. Emily walked slowly, her boots crunching softly. The air was cool, and the forest was quiet except for the occasional chirp of a bird or rustle of a squirrel. She passed a small stream, its water clear and bubbling over smooth stones. The sound was soothing, like a voice whispering calm. As she walked, Emily thought about her father. What would it be like to see him now? Would he look the same? Or would illness have changed him? Would he try to explain himself? Or would he just sit there, expecting her to fill the silence? The questions piled up, each one heavier than the last. She stopped by a large oak tree, its branches sprawling like open arms. Leaning against its trunk, she closed her eyes and let the forest's quiet wrap around her. That evening, Emily sat by the fire again, the letter in her lap. She'd made a decision, though it felt fragile, like a leaf caught in the wind. She would go see him, not for him, but for herself, to close a chapter that had been open too long. She didn't know what she'd say or how she'd feel, but she knew she couldn't keep hiding from it. The next morning, she packed a small bag and drove the 3 hours to her father's town. The road wound through rolling hills, the autumn colors fading into the gray of November. Her stomach churned with nerves, but she kept her eyes on the road, letting the rhythm of driving steady her. When she arrived, the town was small and sleepy, with a single main street lined with brick storefronts. Her father's house was at the edge of town, a modest one-story with peeling paint and a sagging porch. Emily parked her car and sat for a moment, gripping the steering wheel. The lantern from her cabin came to mend its steady glow, a small light in the dark. She took a deep breath and stepped out. Michael answered the door slowly, leaning on a cane. He was thinner than she remembered, his hair gray and sparse, but his eyes were the Samia blue, like hers. He smiled, a hesitant, hopeful thing, and invited her in. The house smelled of coffee and old wood, and the living room was cluttered with books and tools. A single lamp burned in the corner, casting a warm glow. They sat across from each other, the silence heavy but not uncomfortable. Emily spoke first, her voice soft. "I got your letter." Michael nodded, his hands clasped tightly. "I didn't think you'd come." She didn't know how to respond, so she didn't. Instead, she looked around, noticing a small wooden box on the coffee table. It was intricately carved, polished to a soft shine. "Did you make that?" she asked. He nodded again. "I've been carving again. Keeps my hands busy." He paused, then added, "I made it for you." Emily's breath caught. She reached for the box, her fingers tracing the delicate patterns. It was beautiful, a labor of care. She opened it, expecting it to be empty, but inside was a folded piece of paper. She glanced at Michael, who looked away, his expression unreadable. The paper was another letter, written in the same shaky hand. Emily unfolded it, her heart pounding. It wasn't long, just a few lines. "I'm sorry," it began. "I was a coward. I left because I was afraid of failing you, but I failed you anyway. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I've carried you with me every day." Emily's eyes stung. She set the letter down, her hands trembling. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the lamp. She looked at her father, seeing not the man who left but the man who was here now, frail and honest, offering what he could. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said finally, her voice steady, "but I'm here. That's something." Michael's eyes glistened, and he nodded. "It's more than I deserve." They spent the afternoon talking, not about the past but about small things: her cabin, his carving, the way the town's diner still served the best pie. It wasn't reconciliation, not yet, but it was a start. When Emily left, the wooden box was tucked under her arm, a tangible piece of her father's regret and hope. Driving back to her cabin, Emily felt lighter, though not unburdened. The forest greeted her with its familiar quiet, the lantern waiting on her table. She lit it that night, watching the glow fill the room. The storm was gone, inside and out, and in its place was something new, a fragile peace, a chance to heal. As she sat by the fire, Emily realized that coming here wasn't just about her father. It was about her, about choosing to face the hard things instead of running from them. She didn't have all the answers, but she had this moment, this light, this quiet, and for now, that was enough. If you carry a weight like Emily's, don't let it sit in the dark. Open the letter, take the drive, face the storm. The glow on the other side might just be worth it.